Welcome back to Sip and Talk. I'm Joe.
Great to be back.
We've got, well, kind of a wild set of breadcrumbs for you today.
Yeah, they all seem to lead down this pretty fascinating rabbit hole over in Taiwan.
Absolutely. We've been looking at everything from this intense-looking TV show to some really serious talks happening in the U.S. Senate, and even like how Taiwan itself is grappling with some, well, really tricky issues.
It's quite the puzzle we're putting together, definitely.
Okay, so buckle up, because our mission for this deep dive is to get way beyond the headlines. We want to really try and understand how Taiwan is dealing with what a lot of people call cognitive warfare from the PRC.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not just talking tanks and planes here. It's, way more subtle.
Yeah, sneakier in some ways, right. It's about getting inside people's heads, creating divides, chipping away at the foundations of a society without, firing a single shot. And the sources we looked at today, they give us some really different angles on how this is playing out and, importantly, what Taiwan is trying to do about it.
Okay, so let's kick things off with something that really grabbed my attention. This Taiwanese TV show, 0 Day.
Ah.
Now, this isn't your average, feel-good drama. It jumps right into a scenario that's honestly, well, a little unsettling.
It does. From what we've seen, 0 Day paints this picture of the near future. It's set not long after a presidential election in Taiwan.
Okay.
And the basic premise is China uses the excuse of a missing military plane they claim it's search and rescue.
Right, a cover.
Exactly, to suddenly blockade Taiwan. And there's this unspoken threat of military action just hanging there.
Wow, and the trailer for this show, from what we could gather, it looks pretty intense.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking social media just blowing up with fake news, people whispering about government infighting.
Yeah, and even rumors that the president has, fled the country.
Which is classic destabilization stuff.
Totally. And what's fascinating is how the show weaves in these really modern conflict elements, things that aren't about traditional battles.
Like what?
Well, we see these AI-manipulated official press conferences.
Oh, that's creepy.
Super creepy thought, right? And that's alongside cyber attacks knocking out crucial services.
Seriously. And it gets even more dramatic, it sounds like. The trailer shows the financial system just, tanking.
Yep. Which leads to everyone rushing the banks, the stock market crashing, and, foreign governments start pulling their citizens out.
Oh, man, yeah. In movies, that's always the sign things are really bad.
It definitely paints this picture of just widespread panic and instability, and the show doesn't seem to pull any punches. There's organized violence, apparently triggered by infiltrated gangs who are, letting prisoners loose on the streets.
Whoa.
It really plays into this fear of the country being undermined from the inside out.
And that Leonard video transcript we looked at, didn't it really hammer this home, this idea of cooperation from within Taiwan, a fifth column, they called it?
Exactly. The show even depicts Kinmen, that island Taiwan controls really close to the mainland.
Great.
It apparently falls without any conventional fighting at all in the show.
Which goes right to the heart of this cognitive warfare idea, doesn't it?
It really does. If you can sow enough confusion, break down morale, maybe you don't even need to deploy troops.
So this pretty wild trailer drops. What was the reaction like? Did it, get people talking?
Oh, it definitely struck a chord. The BBC and RFA articles we saw showed a real mix of responses. Some people online felt seriously uncomfortable. They saw it as a real warning. There's one quote that really stuck with me. If you feel uncomfortable now, you'll only feel more uncomfortable when the time comes.
Wow, that's heavy.
It suggests a lot of people there are aware of the potential risks, like a wake-up call for some.
Yeah, sounds like it.
Others saw the show as, a necessary way to start a difficult conversation, a way to mentally prep for a possible crisis.
Like practicing for a fire drill, almost.
Kind of. Someone even said it was a sense of being prepared for a rainy day. If we don't talk about it now, Taiwan will have nothing left. Pretty strong words.
But not everyone was on board. I imagine there was some pushback.
Oh, definitely. Some Taiwanese media outlets, like the United Daily News and some political figures, Yang Paochen was mentioned, they actually slammed the show, called it government cognitive warfare.
Wait, they call the show cognitive warfare?
Accused the government of brainwashing and using taxpayer money just to scare people. Fear-mongering, basically.
And I bet Beijing picked up on that pretty quick.
You got it. The PRC's Global Times quoted those critical Taiwanese voices, framing the show as just hyping up mainland attacks. Which, wasn't surprising.
It's kind of wild how the reaction to the show became its own little information battleground.
It really did. But there were more thoughtful takes, too, weren't there?
Yeah, like Professor Chin Kinney.
Right. He saw some potential good in it, suggested it could be a way for the public to absorb information, maybe get a better grasp of what war, especially this kind of hybrid war, might actually look like.
The creator of the show, Cheng Tianmei, she mentioned the war in Ukraine as a big inspiration, right?
She did. And she really emphasized this idea that this kind of cognitive stuff is already happening in Taiwan.
Which lines up with that Leonard video again.
Exactly. Cheng Tianmei felt this real urgency. She was worried that if they didn't talk about these tough issues openly, the chance might just disappear. She had this really powerful line. "We thought the war hadn't started yet, but in fact, the war has already begun."
Man, that really highlights that split, doesn't it? Some feeling like they need to prepare, others maybe just wanting to avoid thinking about it.
And the director, Liu Jingzhen, he really stressed that he wanted to show how a government could potentially become dysfunctional. And the significant role that a so-called fifth column could play in helping outside forces.
Exploring how those internal weaknesses could be exploited.
Right. So you see how this fictional scenario really resonates with real anxieties in Taiwan. And as our sources show, these anxieties are being actively fueled by specific PRC strategies, like those used by the Strategic Support Force.
Which is where that Leonard video gets really specific. It explained how the PRC has this Strategic Support Force, the SSF, specifically their political work department, Unit 6, 7, 7, 16 in Fuzhou.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently their whole mission is basically to undermine Taiwan from within, using what they call the three warfares.
Right. And for anyone listening who hasn't heard that term, the three warfares are public opinion warfare, that's Yulunzan.
Okay.
Then psychological warfare, Zinululan. And legal warfare, Fielzan.
So opinion, psych, and legal.
Exactly. It's a really comprehensive strategy. It's aimed at shaping the information landscape, influencing how people think and feel, and even using legal tools to push their goals. Like with public opinion warfare, we see them amplifying existing social problems online, often using fake accounts to make it look like there's massive discontent.
And the Leonard video gave some pretty clear examples of the kinds of messages they reportedly push online, didn't it?
Yeah, stuff like, Taiwan is just a pawn, the U.S. will abandon us, the KMT and DPP are equally bad, and only fools believe Taiwan can defend itself, really trying to sow doubt and division.
And defeatism, it sounds like.
Absolutely. And what's really interesting is their tactic of cross-coverage, just bombarding people with this stuff across all sorts of platforms, YouTube, social media, everywhere.
So it's not just one message, it's the volume.
It's the volume and the repetition. It's designed to just wear down your critical thinking over time, like a constant drip, drip, drip of negativity and doubt.
Yeah, eroding a society's resilience.
Yeah.
And to really illustrate this, that Leonard video brought up a pretty powerful historical analogy. France in 1940.
That was a striking comparison. The video highlighted how German propaganda really played up the invincibility of their blitzkrieg, creating this feeling of inevitable defeat among the French.
And they also talked about how Germany was working with, neutral French media and some pro-German right-wing groups.
Mm-hmm. Spreading messages like peaceful coexistence is possible, framing communism as the real enemy, telling people not to fight for Britain. Sound familiar?
A little bit, yeah. And just like some of the Taiwan-related messages today, they spread rumors about Britain abandoning France.
Right.
Which further tanked morale and trust.
Exactly. And just as France had those deep internal divisions back then, Taiwan faces its own complex political landscape regarding China, which these campaigns actively exploit.
And the result, as the video pointed out, was this surprisingly quick collapse of French morale and, the defeat of what was supposedly one of the strongest armies in the world.
The video also smartly connected this to the internal ideological divides within France, which really resonates with the kinds of debates happening within Taiwan today.
It's a really sobering reminder, isn't it? How internal disagreements can be weaponized and how these info-ops can have serious real-world consequences.
Absolutely. And it really sets the stage for understanding why outside players, like the U.S., are also watching this whole dynamic so closely.
Which brings us nicely to the second part of our deep dive, the U.S. perspective. Specifically, what came out of a U.S. Senate hearing. This video featured Senator Rubio voicing some pretty big concerns.
That's right. Senator Rubio didn't mince words. He framed the PRC as the biggest long-term threat to the U.S. and stressed the need for, an all-of-government and all-of-society approach to handle it.
And one specific worry he brought up was Beijing trying an energy blockade on Taiwan, like trying to choke them off to force them to give in.
Exactly. A less obvious military move, maybe, but potentially devastating.
So how could the U.S. respond to something like that?
Well, Rubio talked about potential U.S. responses, like boosting our own domestic energy things like LNG, biofuels, and the need for a West Coast LNG terminal to help allies in the region get access to energy.
Okay. The secretary in that hearing also pointed out some broader dangerous imbalances.
Yeah, and what's really interesting there is the focus on vulnerabilities beyond just military stuff. The secretary detailed how the PRC dominates access to and processing of rare earth minerals.
The stuff in all our electronics.
Pretty much, and raised the possibility of them just cutting off supplies, which could cripple industries globally.
And it wasn't just minerals, was it?
No, the secretary also mentioned the PRC's dominance in making precursors for pharmaceuticals, the basic ingredients for medicines, and other key elements, highlighting a very real risk to the world's medicine supply.
So these dependencies give Beijing a lot of leverage.
Huge leverage. And there are major reasons why the U.S. is so concerned about Taiwan's security and stability, whether the pressure from the PRC is military or, economic coercion.
And the fix, according to the secretary.
It involves both new trade agreements and a big push to rebuild the U.S.'s own capabilities in these critical industries, bringing some of that production back home or to friendly nations.
Right. And Senator Rubio specifically linked these vulnerabilities back to the possibility of the PRC trying to take Taiwan, didn't he? Mm-hmm. Either by force or through something like that energy quarantine.
He did. He seemed to suggest these dependencies might make Beijing feel more confident about taking action, knowing the potential disruption they could cause elsewhere.
The secretary also briefly mentioned Ukraine, emphasizing the hope for a lasting peace there. How does that fit in?
Well, it seems like that conflict is very much part of the bigger geopolitical picture influencing the Taiwan situation. The secretary's comments really highlighted how these global security challenges are interconnected. I think the desire to see things stabilize in Ukraine is partly because resources and attention are needed for other potential hotspots, like Taiwan.
Makes sense. Ultimately, though, the secretary agreed it's crucial to make the benefit of a Taiwan event for China less than the cost. Deterrence, basically.
Exactly. And this deterrence, as they outlined it, includes boosting Taiwan's own self-defense capabilities.
Helping them help themselves.
Right. And building a strong regional deterrent involving the U.S. and our allies. It's a multi-pronged strategy aimed at discouraging any potential aggression before it starts.
So from this fictional future in Juro Day to these real U.S. concerns about broader strategic weaknesses, we're really seeing how complex the challenges facing Taiwan are.
Definitely.
And that brings us to our third part. How Taiwan itself is responding on the ground.
That's right. We looked at some concrete steps Taiwan's been taking, particularly from this Taiwan Policy on Chinese Spouses document. And it really shows kind of a two-pronged approach.
Okay, two prongs. What's the first?
Well, on one hand, we're seeing cases where PRC spouses, people from mainland China married to Taiwanese citizens, are being deported.
For what?
For promoting this idea of reunification by force or getting involved in activities linked to the PRC's United Front.
Ah, the United Front again.
Mm-hmm. The Yaya in Taiwan case from March 2025 was a key example mentioned.
Tell us about that.
So this PLC national ran a social media account called Yaya in Taiwan. Her residency permit was revoked because of pro-unification statements that violated Taiwan's Cross-Strait People Relations Act.
Which basically says?
Basically prohibits helping the PRC's United Front efforts. And for you listening, the United Front is a major CCP strategy to influence individuals and groups outside the party, often to advance political goals like unification.
And the Taiwanese government's justification?
Their Mainland Affairs Council, or MACI, was pretty clear. Everyone living in Taiwan has to follow Taiwanese law, and they can be held responsible for speech that goes against international agreements or, stirs up conflict.
How did the public react to that?
Interestingly, it seems the public in Taiwan largely supported it. A MACI poll reportedly showed about 68% were in favor of revoking permits for spouses advocating unification by force and sending them back.
Wow, that's pretty high support. Beijing must have loved that.
Not exactly. The PRC's Taiwan Affairs Office called it political manipulation, said it hurt cross-strait relations. But the Taiwanese ME stood firm, saying they have zero tolerance for United Front activities. And this seems part of a wider trend of increased scrutiny.
There was also that other incident mentioned during the World Masters Games in May 2025, something about athletes being kicked out.
Yeah, there were some online posts claiming PRC athletes were expelled for supposedly planning to display the Chinese flag and express pro-unification views. But it's really important to note that specific incident hasn't been confirmed by mainstream media, so, take it with a grain of salt.
Okay.
Still, it highlights how sensitive things are there around public displays of pro-unification sentiment.
And the document mentioned other cases, too, like online influencers.
Right. In March 2025, 3 PRC online influencers apparently had their residency permits canceled for openly supporting unification by force.
And the government's reasoning was the same. National security, the Cross-Strait Act.
Consistently, yes. It seems to reflect the rising tensions across the strait. And, like with the Yaya case, Beijing reacted with accusations of political suppression and reportedly took some retaliatory steps.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. Pretty strict action against those seen as actively undermining Taiwan or pushing for unification by force. What's the other side?
Well, the document also makes a point of highlighting the positive contributions of many PRC spouses in Taiwan.
Right, because it's definitely not everyone.
Exactly. It's crucial to remember that. Many PRC spouses integrate fully into Taiwanese society and contribute in really positive ways. Some start businesses employing Taiwanese citizens. Others get involved in preserving local culture.
The document gave examples like charity work and education, right? Spouses volunteering, doing cultural exchange in schools.
Mm-hmm. And also cultural exchange through things like opening restaurants, running workshops on traditional arts like calligraphy, organizing art events, things that genuinely build bridges.
And maybe most importantly, there are PRC spouses who actually support Taiwan's democracy and speak out against unification by force.
Yeah, although we often only hear about these anecdotally, but their actions can be really powerful in challenging those negative stereotypes about PRC spouses in Taiwan.
Does the government do anything to encourage that positive side?
It seems so. The document mentions policies aimed at supporting integration, like easing residency and citizenship requirements for spouses.
So they recognize that those who genuinely integrate and contribute are valuable.
It appears that way. The document also notes the role of PRC spouse organizations, like the China Spouse Association, in promoting positive images and showcasing their members' contributions.
So you've got this really clear contrast. Tough measures for the pro-unification by force crowd and support for those who integrate and contribute. That sounds like a really delicate balancing act.
It absolutely is. And it brings up that fundamental question, right? Where do you draw the line between protecting free speech and safeguarding national security?
Especially when political opinions could be seen as a direct threat to the state itself.
It's incredibly tricky. And the document also touches on the difficulties faced by those pro-Taiwan PRC spouses dealing with social prejudice, maybe identity issues. It can't be easy.
So the overall picture is this two-pronged policy trying to navigate those cross-strait tensions.
Yeah, protecting national security while also trying to encourage integration for those genuinely building a life there.
And it really brings us full circle back to 0 Day, doesn't it?
It does.
The show depicts both that internal undermining and the societal chaos that could be exploited. So the government's actions against those openly supporting unification seem like a direct, real-world response to the kinds of threats the drama portrays.
Precisely. It's a tangible example of how seriously Taiwan is taking that potential threat from within, alongside the more obvious external military pressure.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really seen how multi-layered this whole cognitive warfare issue is. It's not just about military stuff at all.
Not at all. It's about shaping thoughts, exploiting societal weaknesses, influencing perceptions.
And we've seen how Taiwan is actively grappling with it on multiple levels through culture, like 0 Day raising awareness.
Through specific government policies addressing potential internal threats.
And all within this broader international context of concern, like we heard in that U.S. Senate hearing.
It really underscores that being well-informed today means understanding these more subtle forms of influence and how society is trying to build resilience against them.
Which leaves a really important question for you listening, I think.
Yeah.
When we're faced with this kind of external influence and disinformation, how do we balance that fundamental right to speak freely with the need to keep our society safe?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And maybe also, what's our individual responsibility in helping our community stay resilient against these kinds of threats? Definitely something to mull over.
Absolutely. And hey, before we forget, got to give a shout out to our buddy Micky.
I love that he's staying true to himself while exploring this new creative outlet. It's inspiring.
It really is. So to all our listeners out there, do yourselves a favor And check out Mickey's YouTube channel. You won't be disappointed.
We'll drop a link in the show notes so you can easily find it. And hey, if you're feeling generous, give him a like and subscribe. Every bit of support helps.
Absolutely. Let's show Mickey some love.
All right, folks, it's time to wrap up this episode of Sip and Talk. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave us a review. We love hearing from you.
Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time.